Drawing your sphere and your cube are going to be about 3 main steps, and the last one's going to be adding all those values and the different shades and highlights that you see. So let's start with the first step. Just draw your circle and your cube shape. The circle does not have to be perfect. Just kind of sketch it out. So there's a circle. And to make our cube, you're going to start with a very wide diamond. There it is. And then bring down a line, down a line, down a line. And as long as they're somewhat even, you'll be able to make that into your cube. I'm going to erase a little bit over here. There. Now I have a circle and a basic cube drawing. It just doesn't have any shading or any value added. And the next step, number 2, is to add a table or surface. Right now they're just floating on a paper, but to make it look real, it needs to sit somewhere. So I'm just going to draw a line right here, all the way across my paper, going around my objects. And now they're all sitting on a table. The third step is to add the values. So you've watched it, and you'll be able to make it out yourself. The first place I would start with is the shadow that's on the object. I'm going to do the whole sphere and then do the whole cube. I like to do them all at one time instead of switching back and forth because I might forget something. So the shadow on my sphere, if my light's coming from this direction, is going to be that crest shadow. So I can kind of draw out that shape, and then I'm going to shade it in. Just like yesterday we're shading with what would be our darkest, and we'll go over it over and over again. I don't want to keep it a perfect C shape because if it's got sharp edges, it's going to look like there's a sharp edge on my sphere. You'll see that difference when we go over and work on that on our cube because it does have sharp edges. And bringing it all the way up. I have 2 sharpened pencils so that I don't have to get up and sit back down and up and sit back down. If you can, I would do that, but I know a lot of you only have 1 pencil, so that's totally fine. You just might need to sharpen it between your different objects. And I'm going to make it a little fatter over here. Make sure that middle is really dark. Okay, so I've got the shadow that's on the sphere. Next are the different midtones, our different gray values, and they're going to keep kind of swooping around it, and we need to leave that highlight on the side. So I'm going to just kind of go over the same edge, but remember my pressure changed so that it's a gray instead of what looks like my black. And I keep pulling it around. I like to turn my arm and my paper and my whole body instead of going in different directions because I think it looks smoother. I would recommend doing that too. I'm going to cover up this edge a little bit. So this should be my really dark gray because it's right next to the shadow. It wouldn't go from a shadow to a light gray. It's going to go to a dark gray. And by going back over that crest shadow, I'm still making it darker and darker and darker. So here's my 1 midtone. And now I'm going to bring it again and I'm going to get lighter. And I'm still re-going over it so it's smooth so that we can kind of see that it's getting a little bit darker just by having that pencil go over it again. And we don't want it to look sharp, so I'm going back over the area where it changes so that it's a little smoother. Just another layer of pencil there will help kind of camouflage, cover that up a little. And bring it all the way up. The more spheres you draw, the better you're going to get at it, because you'll just start to notice different things about how you do it, different things about what you want to be doing. And I'm going to go all the way just to the very edge over here, just a little bit. So now I've got my second midtone. And it goes from really dark, a little darker, a little lighter. And I'm going to stop there and do my cast shadow, the shadow that's down on my table. So it's a circle shape, so it's going to be like an oval. And it doesn't start right at the bottom. It kind of has a little lip, making a little oval. So now I have my shadow down on the table. And this one's going to be really dark, just like this, because it's an area where no light is hitting. So I start right here and make it as dark as I can. Try and fill it in. This is an area I'm going to go back later and touch up, but for the sake of the video, I'll just kind of wrap it up. You don't want a perfect edge because even though it's a shadow, it's not perfect. So maybe a little bit lightly around the edges, making it a little bit gray. Kind of finish out that cast shadow. All right, and then the last thing I'm going to do, step like 4 in these shading and value, is I'm going to check the highlight. If you don't have an area that's perfectly white, you may want to take an eraser and double check it. Just go back over, but mine stayed really nice and white. I think it could go a little lighter before, instead of just gray to the highlight. So I'm going to do the teeniest bit because I think that'll help my highlight show. And there, I've added all of those on my sphere. Okay, let's do the same thing, but let's do it on the cube. I think it'll go a little bit faster. So I'm going to add the shadow on the cube, which is this darkest corner because our light is still coming from this source. So this edge needs to just be really shaded in. And we're going to bring it down at least a little bit. Okay, so it's a nice dark color. I've got my value there. And then I'm going to do the midtones. I'm going to start on this side, which should also be really my darkest value in my grays. But I do want to lighten it up a bit. So I just kind of cover up the side, and I'm going to do a little gradual change over here by adding another layer, making it look a little darker. So it looks a little more realistic because it's not going to suddenly change. So now this side's basically done. I've got my shadow, my midtone, and then there is a midtone on the top. If this side's getting hit with the light first, it's the lightest. So this is my really light one. So remember, it's another midtone. If you make it a little darker gray than maybe I am, that doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means that it's a little more in shadow in your image than it is in mine. So there, I like that midtone. It'd definitely be a lot lighter on my little scale that we use to check our work. Now that I've got my midtones, then I go ahead and we're already on the cast shadow now. This one's a little different because it's a cube. It's got those sharp points. So we're going to bring it from this edge. And over here, we're going to kind of guess where we think this shadow might fall. And then it ends with a little bit of a triangle or a point to be the end of the shadow. And again, I'm going to keep it pretty dark, especially right over here and in the middle of this shadow, because there's no light getting there. The actual cube is blocking all that light. And then I can bring it out a little bit more. Go right up to the edge. If you leave a little white space, it's going to actually look really confusing. You gotta bring it right up to the edge. And then you can kind of fuzz it out a little bit, especially over here where it might be a little less crisp. I got a little carried away. Let me erase a little bit of that. Okay, now I've got my cast shadow, and we can double check our highlight. This side, I haven't done anything to it. My hand's getting a little dirty, so there's a little bit of smudge on there. And the only thing I could add is there would probably be a little bit of shadow down here, the teeniest bit, like a mid-tone. The teeniest bit, but really this whole side could be completely white. And that already now, with that value, looks much more like a 3D cube. So the sphere takes a little longer. It's more gradual, it's curvy. Don't get too caught up in trying to make it perfect, because it'll take a long time, and it honestly may never get that perfect way that you want it to be. The cube, I think, will be a lot easier. And after we've done this all together, we'll go ahead and add it with our other ways of making our value.